I was incredibly moved the other day because I came in. This is our library. This is our librarian, Lisa Norberg, Dale Perreault, and Mary Mann, our archivists. And we have an incredible exhibition of artifacts pulled out of the archive of Cooper and that they've been really incredible work pulling and come to life. And Cooper has an incredible history. 1859, incredible amount of social political movements were born here. The suffrage movement was born here. Susan B. Anthony had offices here. The NAACP came from here. The Red Cross came from here. Countless social political movements grew out of this place. And I've always believed in the social political project and the educational project are inside of each other and literally holding each other. So when I came the other day and saw this exhibition, I asked if I could share it with us for me.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. Well, so these specific artifacts are the Ledgers and Orders of the Cooper Union. They're bound books with sort of money in, money out, or just lists of speakers, depending on the style of the book. And they look really boring, but their contents are really, really exciting. I'll just run you along here. So we start with a monster mass meeting of the New Immigrants Protective League. This was in 1898, whereas this image is from a little bit earlier. This is the Chinese Equal Rights League. Both of these having to do with changes in immigration law in the latter half of the 1800s. The Chinese Equal Rights League was actually formed here in the Great Hall. They had a meeting and they put out this appeal as a result of that meeting. It's an appeal of the Chinese Equal Rights League to the people of the United States for equality of manhood. Probably now we would say personhood or humanhood. But either way, they were responding to the Chinese Exclusion Act and then the Geary Act, all of which made it harder and harder to both immigrate and stay in the United States. These are obviously issues that we're still dealing with today, so many years later. They were in the Great Hall in 1892. And Dale, please feel free to jump in at any juncture. Over here, we have W.E.B. Du Bois, famous for a lot of things, but maybe most for being one of the founders of the NAACP. Their founding conference was in New York City, and they had the night sessions here at the Cooper Union. So he was here for that, but he was also here a bunch of other times, just speaking on so many different things. This program that we have here, he did a lecture on Ethiopia, and it's got his, we never use his full name anymore, but this has W.E. Burghardt Du Bois. I don't even know what the W and the E are for. Do you guys?
Edward Burghardt?
William Edward Burghardt. I knew Dale would know.
Have to fact check that for sure.
But that feels right. So W.E.B., here's where his name appears as well in the ledger. So we've blown up pages from the ledger along with these materials. One thing that I love about these pages just taken in situ? Whatever. Is that you see such a variety of stuff. So you've got, icons, W.E.B., along with the Dramatic Club, which was just a Cooper Union student club that's meeting at night. There's a lecture here, Women Are Here to Stay. Shocker. Lewis Mumford, all kinds of, such a mix, the Ukrainian American League. So you've got big players, really small, just student stuff going on all at the same time, all in the same space.
And Lewis Mumford with a real connection to the art of oratory. Just his talks are just compelling, beautifully delivered. Yeah, a few recordings of that. It's just, we want everyone to be discovered, rediscovered in this project, and the fact that people can see things online, voices from the Great Hall, and with the digitized ledgers. It's just a boom for researchers.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have such a good time hanging out with these people all day, so we like to share that. Yeah. So the 8-Hour League also met here. They were fighting for 8-hour work days. At the time, there was no limit on how many hours your employer could make you work. It's still, frankly, I think a little slippery, like with the tech era, you're expected to be on all the time, but that's a whole different discussion than we're having today. So the 8-hour league, there were 8-hour leagues in most big US cities. I know there was one in Chicago, one in San Francisco, but their motto was 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, 8 hours for what you will. So live your life, have a good time. This is the 8-hour league marching past this building that we're in right now. And in the theme of unions here, we moved to the Actors Protective Association. We had a really wonderful exchange with archivists at SAG-AFTRA, and this is the first iteration of actors unions. So it's happening here in the Great Hall. The Actors Protective Association gets together, led by this guy, William Davidge. He was a stage comedian, and I think I told you guys before. There's an article about these meetings. They had a bunch of them here, and in one of them, they're being really serious. They're talking about unions, but he can't resist doing his Abraham Lincoln impression, and that like takes up half the article. It's like he did this great impression.
The actor must emerge.
Yeah. Then here, moving on to someone else who cares about the 8-hour workday, but also lots of other stuff, including free love. Who's a big advocate for that. Victoria Woodhull. She was the first female presidential candidate. She spoke here several times. She was sort of vilified in the press. This is her depicted as just a demon holding a sign that says free love, and behind her there's like drinkers, it's just very, oh my gosh, what a terrible lady. By free love, she meant, she has this beautiful, beautiful quote. Free love is an unalienable, constitutional, and natural right to love whom I may, to love as long or as short a period as I can, to change that love every day if I please. Like imagine living without that. I think sometimes we take for granted our ability to do so many things today. I mean, there's still a lot of people who cannot do this in different places, but to be able to love whoever you want and to be able to get a divorce when it's not working out, those are big deal rights. And she was advocating for that back in the mid-1800s. Another rad lady, Sarah B. Chase, also spoke here. We know a lot less about her than Victoria Woodhull, but her big thing was lecturing and distributing contraception. And she was arrested several times for that. She ended up getting put in jail for performing an abortion. Her and Victoria Woodhull are sort of linked both by being targeted by Anthony Comstock. Do you want to add anything about this?
I just want to say, looking through the ledgers and transcribing them, you can see how Sarah is referred to as Mrs. Dr. Chase initially, and then only months later, with more and more discussions that she's holding, is she referred to as Sarah B. Chase, Dr. Sarah B. Chase.
Yeah, they removed the Mrs. She doesn't have to be. Be just a gal.
Yeah. Mysterious Dr. Chase.
Students have asked me, wait, so what was contraception in the 1870s? It's kind of gross. I don't even know if you want this in your video. It's a douching syringe. They didn't have condoms. They didn't have anything like that. So it's a very, tough time to be a gal in America. The world, probably. Here's where they appear in the ledgers as well. This is Victoria. Down here, we get into some of the more esoteric, if you will, stuff that happened here. 6 nights of the Davenport brothers doing seances. I see the excitement in our cameraman's eyes. The Davenport brothers were these 2 guys, Ira and William, and then they had some dudes that worked with them. It wasn't always these same 2 dudes. They did these seances. Their most famous act was that they would lock themselves in this thing, this cabinet, and they would have audience members tie them up. And then when they were locked in, music would emanate from the cabinet. And then they'd have people open it and be like, look, we're still tied up. Couldn't have been us. Must have been the ghost. They were really, really popular. They toured internationally. Way later, Houdini tracked down one of them, and I looked it up for today and still forgot which one it was. But Houdini tracked down one of them and asked, what's the deal? And he said, yeah, we faked it. But Houdini was sort of famously, he liked magic for entertainment, but not for duping people, and thought this stuff took advantage of grieving people. They were doing this at a time, so they were here in 1873. This is immediately post-Civil War. So the entire country has somebody to grieve. Everybody's lost somebody. And there are seances going on, even in the most serious locations, like the White House, they had seances there. Mary Todd Lincoln had them. She lost a kid. So this is both kind of silly and fun, but also really speaking to some pain that people in the country are feeling. More entertainment, if you will. General Tom Thumb.
Novelty acts.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about Tom Thumb? You know so much about
A little bit
him.
about Tom Thumb. It's just a surprise to see names appear in the ledger and then Tom Thumb, and to check the names as you go along. Kind of seeing Sarah B. Chase.
Yeah.
Unknown people, for the most part, and just learning to be discovered and research. But with Tom Thumb, this was another week of programs, so a boon for the great hall coffers of the quintet of Tom Thumb, Commodore Nutt, Tom Thumb's wife, Lavinia, and her sister, Minnie, the Warren sisters. They were married at Grace Church. And
Right down the street.
Commodore Nutt loved Tom Thumb's wife, but Tom Thumb chose Lavinia.
Yeah.
So thus his expression. And
I know, he looks so sad. He's the best man at a wedding of the woman he loves.
And this is a student publication, right? That
Yeah.
inspired by, of course, the play of Tom Thumb of Peter Cooper and Tom Thumb in the 19th century.
Tom Thumb became
Phenomenal.
incredibly wealthy for his entertainment. He did impressions, he did songs, he did stuff like that, but it was all sort of advertised under the, watch him do this stuff and be 3 feet tall. So that's sort of the bit. But he was quote unquote discovered by P.T. Barnum, who also spoke here.
Yeah, several times and often
Yeah.
on temperance.
Yeah.
So, and the Davenport brothers show up in Barnum's Humbugs of the World. He investigates all these charlatans and because Barnum won himself, of course, but
Yeah.
this is my
Those are, isn't it funny that magicians are the ones that hate that the most? And entertainers are the most skeptics. We also had billiard tournaments here, quite a lot of them. This is the great national match. The winners of this match competed for $1,000 and custody of the championship cue, which is kind of a lot of money in 1866. The guy that put this on, Michael Phelan, was a famous billiards player and maker. He wrote a lot of books about how to play billiards, and he is in the Billiard Congress of America Hall of Fame, which I didn't know existed, but billiard people, I guess, would know. Do you guys want to see the books that we pulled all this stuff from? Okay, let's do it. Dale, do you have a maybe something about? Oh no, you do it. So Dale's been
let's see, if
transcribing these ledgers, so he has this very intimate relationship
We're going to
with
start
them.
over here so we can swing this. This goes on. And then in the center, and then just pulling down. It's another magic cabinet of the import players. Then we want the glare of reflection. Come around, Jackson, and see. Here we have 1863, February, lecture by Fred Douglass, mixed with lectures by G.Q. Colton, who had an office in the building as well. and performed nitrous oxide.
The inventor of laughing gas.
Yeah, laughing gas. And,
I don't know if he
worked on
invented
people.
laughing gas. He was the guy that thought of using it for dental work. Yeah. But he was doing demonstrations where people would take laughing gas in the Great Hall and other people would watch and be like, wow.
More of the
look at
19th
that.
century entertainment factor.
Yeah.
But then, I mean, high, low, and everything in between. Serious and silly and
Yeah.
frivolous.
On this same page, there's the dry good clerks, which is a union. Any kind of union you could think of was meeting here. What was the one you recently found that was so delightful?
The feather workers.
The Feather Workers Union.
So making those pillows in
Yeah.
1988, or stuffing pillows, stuffing feather beds. I mean, dry goods clerks, tailors, parasol makers, and
Cigar
at a certain
rollers?
point, parasol makers just disappears and it gets co-opted by umbrella makers fully.
Umbrellas took over.
Yeah. I mean, they were always running parallel, but the parasols, I guess, fell out of favor
Yeah.
at a certain point. It's fun to trace.
Is the umbrella term for
Ah.
parasol? Sorry, that was.
Did you get a good close up?
Yeah, the beautiful cursive writing, which is sometimes hard to read, sometimes very clear.
Yeah, it depends on who's writing.
Yeah.
And this is hard to get out at this angle. Let me scooch this a little bit because the next one has a. So yeah, this volume has James A. Briggs. Where is he?
February
Line 28. James A. Briggs. He paid for Abraham Lincoln's speech, which was the Right Makes Might address. He invited him to speak in New York. They were supposed to speak. Where were they supposed to speak?
Plymouth Church in Brooklyn, and it's canceled at the last minute, I think.
So
Lincoln
came
discovered
here.
when he got here that it would be a Cooper Union.
A lot of this amounts to convenience. We were the largest event space below 14th Street for a really long time, and also cheap, and sort of known to be a friend to the working person, if you will. You know, like we have this free library, we have this free school opportunities, all this stuff. So
The larger and the smaller rooms, at
Yeah.
different rates and many times free.
You know, I think it's kind of incredible when you try to piece together the whole story of, I mean, first of all, Peter Cooper removing all the barriers to education, you know, race, gender, socioeconomic, religious background, all of it.
the religion one was a big deal at that time.
There was
Yeah.
there was nothing else. And
Yeah.
public education didn't exist in America. I mean, we were kids, you know, the rich kids went to school. And, yeah.
There was no New York Public Library.
No, Carnegie later, you know, followed it. But when you think of like doing that with education, and then creating the Great Hall as this, you know, sort of, you could argue the most important civic space in America, there's all the things that are growing up. And so there's Abraham Lincoln, there's suffrage and all that, but there's also the seances and unions and all this. I'm talking about the complexity and diversity of it. For me, it's really moving at this moment because when you think of the effervescence of free speech coming out of that Great Hall, and then the catching of the archive. I mean, the Great Hall's right below us, one floor below. These columns are in the Great Hall. And so this idea that like all of that activity and motion and movement and interaction is actually taught because it's an educational institution. There's an archive.
Yeah.
And of course, it's only recently that that archive has been accessible and come to life and, you know, seriously, like, but the artifacts themselves were
Yeah. The
captured.
fact that these were kept is,
Captured.
we're so lucky. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's just, there's something remarkable happening between the idea of like free speech holding up the building and then the library where
Yeah.
That was the vision of John King.
Yeah, absolutely. He believed that the cultural memory captured in the books, in the artifacts, that all of that, it's almost like this kind of civic popcorn machine, where everything is bubbling and then it's captured here. And part of the beautiful thing about the archive is that it's past and present at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
This is now. This is now. It also is then, because it was captured then in this experience.
Yeah.
And these artifacts are just this incredible thing that we can, in our present tense daily lives, walk in here, engage in the present tense experience of this crucial past. I mean, if we're going to make any sense of this dizzying world we live in.
Yeah. Well, we were I was in Lisa's class last night and we were talking about how, like, we live in the house that history built. Like, we cannot, operate in it without understanding where the drafts are coming from, why is the roof leaking, if you don't know those things, how are you going to survive?
You have no chance of making sense of any of it or contributing. I always say the crises of our time, ultimate crisis of time, it's the crisis of knowledge. And so, in a very pragmatic sense, an archive is probably the most important because it allows us to attempt to register transformation, to register what has happened, what is happening, what might happen. And our capacity to register transformation is dramatically changed when we live, 160, 170 years is a present tense, is a now. This is when we live.
And it continues. These are a record of the past. They're a record about 100 years of history, from 1858 to 1947.
Up to here, 57.
57, yeah. But, there's a reason why Kathy Hochul decided to come here to sign the bill that made New York's state a place where you could come here and worship if you can't get it anywhere else. There's a reason why people come to the Great Hall still. This is it's a place of living history.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we have the same podium.
Yeah,
We
it's
don't
true.
put it in a museum. I always say when that goes to
Well, that's Cooper style. We reuse until we can't anymore. These were made by students. We don't have a lot of money, but we do good things with what we got.
I was in McSorley's the other day doing a conversation with Bill Morrison about his films. And our friend Richie, who works there, showed us a painting, a big on the wall next to Peter Cooper. There's an old painting of Peter Cooper. And next to it is this large painting. And he said that was given to them 150 years ago by an art student.
Yeah.
An art student went in and gave them this painting. And they hung it on the wall that day, and it's never moved.
That makes sense. I'm glad the nail hasn't rusted. Well, that Peter Cooper picture, my understanding is that Peter Cooper used to come there and he used to come there and hang out, but he didn't drink because he was also, like Barnum, a temperance guy. And this whole idea, temperance, leading to all these things, this idea that, if you want people to stop drinking, they need to have other stuff to do, whether it's watching Tom Thumb or going to the library and learning stuff at the free library.
Yeah.
So many things came out of this one urge to stop people.
It was the only barrier that Peter Cooper ever put up. This place was free, open to all. There were no barriers based on race, gender, religion, money, any of it. The only barrier was you couldn't be drunk.
Yeah.
Because the Bowery right here had 100,000 Bowery men. Homeless alcoholics walking around on the Bowery. Yeah. When I was a kid in the 80s, I came in the 80s, there was still about 10,000 left between here and Canal. But there were 100,000 in the 1870s, 80s, 90s, and it dwindled through the 20th century. I think it was something like 50,000 in the 50s. But there were about 10,000. I think that maybe 200.
Yeah.
But it's so the free library. Everybody could come, would do whatever they wanted, except you had to be sober.
And they had publications in so many different languages from so many different places.
Right.
Yeah.
Seeing the newspapers from where you came
Yeah.
in this new neighborhood and adjusting to life in the new country. The people Sciences Institute here.
Yeah.
College with that. Having free lectures.
Yeah. Well, I think Peter Cooper believed that education could transform society, could transform the crises. I mean, and I think it's just as true today.
Yeah.
You know, the United Nations has the Sustainable Development Goals, or 17 most significant crises on Earth, and is a framework to address them. And number 4 is education. And I always make the argument that that's the one that can address all the others.
Yeah.
Because it can transform people's perceptions of the crisis, and we can actually get somewhere.
He has a beautiful quote, which I'm not going to even try to say right now because I can't remember it. But it's something about, it's not even about education per se, but it's about education as like a knowledge and thirst for truth. And just like how if you have that, you know, you're going to live a better life. You're just going to be happier and healthier and kinder to your fellow human. He was very community-minded. Should we show you a few more ledgers?
Yes.
I know we've got a... This is our fun little suction cup. This is fun sliding action for your video. It's not quite... There we go. Is that in? Yep. All right. I'll fix this one if you want to move on to the... I don't think you need it to open.
Oh, this one, you don't?
So what do we have over there?
We have a ledger from 1867 to 1874. We have a Cuban meeting. Susan B. Anthony, right there. Equal rights meeting.
The Cuban meeting is really interesting. It's like for an independent Cuba. Is that this book, too?
Yeah, left line 4. Up here, yeah. The Cuban mass meeting. The idea of a mass meeting also kind of the monster mass meeting, what mass society was. And the Great Hall helped and invited more people than today with the fire standards.
Yeah, it was like 3,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, now it's 1,000.
Yeah, can you imagine 3,000 people in that room?
Well,
No,
also
that's great.
interesting, the school is currently 1,000 students.
Yeah.
It's 600 engineers, 300 artists, 150 architects, and we have 2 buildings. Originally, it was just this one building, and it was 3,000 students. But it was night and day school.
Yeah.
And the majority were night.
And the events in the Great Hall were kept cool and comfortable by Peter Cooper's fantastic invention that was like a, how would you, it was like a
Ventilator?
enormous fan that ran under, it ran behind and then pushed out in holes under the seats. And we used it for 100 years. We were still using it in the 1950s. Keep people cool, which is delightful. It was maybe more reliable than our current HVAC. I don't know.
Undoubtedly.
Let's pick a box we can page through a little bit to open. Which one do you think is more fun to page through?
One of the more modern ones.
Why don't we go over
Find some
here?
familiar names in the 50s.
Yeah. And David, you can do the honors if you want to touch.
Oh,
And just see what names come across. This is a series on the atomic age, basically from January 1948. So there's J. Robert Oppenheimer.
Wow,
right
look at
there,
that.
and, yeah.
J. Robert Oppenheimer.
But many physicists, several, in this section, including John Wheeler, The Structure of the Atom, John Ray Dunning, Atom Smashers, Sumner T. Pike, the work of the U.S. Atomic Energy Commissioner, and J. Robert Oppenheimer on physical research in the near future.
Wow, you know that thing about making it present, right? When you engage, it is literally the it's presence of the past in the present. It's like ghosts.
It is.
There's a one world or one time is made present in another time, which is right now.
We had, I don't remember if I told you this, David, but we had a group of fifth graders kind of recently, and one of them said, you shouldn't let us touch these. And then afterwards, he spent a long time with Dale sort of paging through the ledgers, and afterwards said, I'm never touching my hands. I'm never washing my hands again. I touched history. It was like, oh, so cute. If you wrote that, like as fiction, you'd be like, that's too cheesy, but it was so cute. Yeah.
And downstairs they're starting to record more lectures now. Yeah. And that's what we have archived on Voices from the Great Hall.
When
A little
did that
bit
start,
later.
the Voices?
The earliest is 1941. John Dewey's talk on the easy.
On that very night. And they recorded it.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it was on lacquer discs. It was digitized.
Isn't that something that's the shock of the present led somebody to say we should record?
Yeah,
We
yeah.
need to capture this. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's why part of why this is out, which I don't know if I talked about before, is because these have all just been digitized. So they've joined about 3,000 audio and video recordings. Is that right?
Yeah, and over 900 that people can listen to right now.
Yeah. So this is all available for researchers anywhere in the world to sort of page through and think about.
And this is part of the Voices?
It's on Voices, yes. Voices from the Great Hall.
Cooper Union Library, Internet Archive.
Yeah. We've tried to make it as accessible as possible. So yeah, you can also find these on Internet Archive.
Holsters and Spring Makers Union, United Furniture Workers of America.
It's just, it reflects what was happening at the time in a way that other resources do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just lessens a little bit during the summer. But I mean, in terms of the Great Hall and the other spaces, but then you can see how it's just the wave of autumn in New York.
Yeah.
Kind of like-
It's true.
It's good.
Another constant. But Lisa's right. I mean, it's a. I don't even remember how you just put it 2 seconds ago. But because this space is not a fancy Carnegie Hall, or only for community center, you have a real mix of everything. You've got like community groups and nationally, internationally famous people all doing their thing.
Yeah.
Which is, it's amazing.
And German groups, Italian, Belgian.
Yeah.
Some of which have faded with time, other, their impact is still felt today.
When this, more or less, is when John Haydock was a student here. He was here, I believe, 48 to 50 to 50. Or
I
maybe
wonder-
50 to 52, depending on blanking.
Do you know if he went to events in the Great Hall? Sometimes students did and sometimes they didn't. I just interviewed a guy who graduated in 1960. He told me the only thing he remembered seeing in the Great Hall was actually not in the Great Hall. It's like listed as a Great Hall event, but it was across the street. It was a cornerstone for the engineering building. And the president, was it Hoover? He said Hoover was not good. He was like not a great performer, in my opinion.
Yeah, we don't have a record of them in the Great Hall. But
I saw
other presidents.
Clinton when he was a candidate, when he was president. I saw Obama when he was a candidate. I saw Bobby Seale, founder of the Black Panthers.
Oh, wow.
Tons and tons since the mid '80s. I've been seeing things. The Great Hall. I have a list somewhere of about, I think it's 1,680 seminal speeches that have been given. I should send it to you.
Yeah, we can do a
Excel.
cross comparison list because we also have a, that would be great.
And Sue Gusso mentioned she saw WE
That's cool.
when she was a student.
Ah, Sue.
Yeah, John was a day student, and there were less of them than night students at his time. 50. I've seen the list in architecture, and I don't know the exact numbers, but it was like maybe there were 16 day students and 30 students or
Came
something.
back from the war.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So it might have been an older crop of students as well.
Yeah. So that too.
Well, yeah, I mean, the Cooper Union, it's interesting, this book, when you point out these people, obviously Peter Cooper knew what he was doing, union, which of course you can say union, you can also say unions as in union workers, Union Square, which was the center, and then of course the Union of Science and Art.
Yeah.
So, he was very
And
thoughtful.
all the streets kind of converging.
Exactly. Yeah, Cooper Square. But the bringing in the latest atom smashing conversations, and of course all the talks on history and social political, and then having the actual unions here.
Yeah.
The workers' unions mixing in that debate. It's really an extraordinary mission and vision of removing the barriers, removing the barriers to understanding, to education, to mingling, to have all these different people mixing and mingling. It's really kind of the key. I always say that Cooper obviously has had a huge impact on lots of all areas, arts and sciences and architecture. It's like the little engine that could. It's like unbelievable. And it's a tiny place. There's 1,000 students. It's not 30,000 person research university.
It's true.
And I always say, it's not an accident of history. It's because Peter Cooper removed all the barriers. It's not two separate facts, right? You remove all the barriers, free education, open to all, everybody's mingling. He creates this cauldron of interaction that is robust, it's intense, like the Amazon or like the Galapagos. You have all this kind of difference interacting, and then it changes the world. So
We joke that you could very easily do a 6 degrees to Cooper Union. Like everything is connected in some way. Which is fantastic for such a small institution.
yeah.
It's also interesting. We have a letter of Peter Cooper's where he was talking about the curriculum as they were designing the curriculum, and he was very passionate that the most important course that needed to be taught was also the most difficult, was going to be political science.
Yeah, to be a good citizen, you need to know about the politics. But yeah, he has a lot of angst about how do we staff this? It's too important to just trust anyone. And so,
Wow.
yeah.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Lincoln was really more or less unknown when he came here. I think Peter Cooper felt like because Peter Cooper's 20 years older, actually 18 years older than Lincoln. Lincoln, Darwin, and Peter Cooper all have the same birthday, February 12th.
Oh wow.
And Darwin and Lincoln's the same year, and Peter Cooper was 18 years older. And I think Peter Cooper felt like, this is what we need, because he really doesn't have much of a chin. Nobody knew who he was. And then he came here, he did his Right Makes Mine, and he was a national figure within 2-3 weeks because Peter Cooper invited the press. By then he knew.
Yeah.
And Matthew Brady.
That's also a very fast spread of information for that time. The idea of becoming big overnight, that didn't really exist.
No. But I think really in my mind, the fact that happened with Lincoln, of course we know how he won. Cooper became known very quickly as a place where you have something to say, and you're not known.
Yeah.
And that's why Frederick Douglass and Red Cloud, and all of these things, everybody was coming here.
And
It's
still
the same
are.
reason
Yeah.
Clinton, and the same reason Obama came here for his first, during the campaign, his first address on economic policy. He came to Great Hall. Paul Volcker, he was previous chairman of the Federal Reserve, and I studied and stuff. So I remember thinking, that's Paul Volcker standing in the audience watching Obama. And people joke this was as close to Wall Street.
Well, Clinton was just here this past spring for the anniversary of the peace accords in Ireland. We still got presidents cycling through.
And unions. you know.
And
that's
unions.
what's
Oh,
important,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah, SAG was marching through.
Yeah. And don't forget those rent control meetings.
The rent control meetings, yeah, the rent board meets regularly here. There was a big protest at the last meeting because they voted to raise the stabilized rent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're not from New York City, that's a big deal.
Tammany
You
Hall.
mentioned birthdays, and I feel like you should know this. I don't know if the camera needs to know this or not. Dale has the same birthday as this building. Yeah, Cornerstone laid
400th year.
September 19th. And then Dale, sorry, yeah. And then Dale.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah, one of those years.
yeah.
Crucial, our archivists. We need people in the archives who are
Yeah.
part of the structure of the building.
Anti-Tammany Hall. You see in the legends the committee of 70, the committee of 60. Just all these anarchists,
Yeah.
socialists.
So everybody. Yeah.
You know, I have a friend at the United Nations.
The Socialist League are pretty good.
He said to me one time, he's an elder statesman, in the 80s at this point. He spent his whole life as a diplomat in various countries. And he said, he loves Cooper. And he said to me, you know, Cooper Union is more important than the United Nations. And I was like, you know, listen, thank you, I appreciate that, you know, take it easy. And he's like, all right. I think we can agree you've had better speakers than we have. I said, okay, no argument.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah, not bad.
Is there anything more that we want to share with them, Dale? Also, I'm sorry I got the birthday wrong. That's also my child's birthday, so that's very embarrassing for me. The Socialist Labor Party, United Garment Workers. Also, this cover is just really lovely. I'll pull this open for you.
This is where
Not without the suction, but not.
feather workers are in this.
Oh.
So,
You know, it's another, when I'm thinking about the different meetings, the furniture and the feathers, and, it's another dimension, you know, which is bound up in both education and the social political, which is the giant spectrum of crafts
Yeah.
that have existed.
Yeah.
And in the very recent past have really been sort of cut off. I mean, you know, it's kind of mind-boggling. I grew up in craft. My family built tractor trailers since there were wagons and sleighs in the 1800s. And so I grew up immersed in a culture of craft. And these ledgers are really capturing the fact of the material imagination, the material engagement that people had. There were so many different ways. And I'm pretty convinced that you know, craft is a culture of listening ultimately. You know, to know how to make something, you have to listen to it. And I grew up in it, so I know that doesn't stop at the material, right? Listening to the material world, you're listening to each other, you're listening to the community, you're creating an atmosphere of paying attention, care. And now, you know, in the last, you could say 50 years, you could say 25 years, you know, there's been like an evaporation. It's like there's a stigmatization to craft in the end. You know, what's happening is, you know, people are hesitant because it's associated with poverty. You know, ditch digger, and, you know, bricklayer, and you know, people are fearful of it in the end. I found that, having grown up in it, and most of my friends still live in it, I can see that there's an apprehension because people don't want their children to end up being laborers. And the challenge is there's an enormous amount of knowledge that is swept away with the craft, and an enormous amount of empathy and ethics and material reciprocity that is swept away too. So I just think like having the presence of all of these different makers and kinds of making that were meeting here because they had things to discuss. You know, they weren't meeting here just because they wanted hang out,
Yeah.
right? They had stuff
Pressing matters.
Well, the Garment Workers Union, this is a famous one, which you probably know about. They had a big meeting in the Great Hall, and this girl, Claire Limlick, and I say girl pointedly because she was 15, right?
19.
She was 19?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought she was even younger. She was very, very young. She got up and she started yelling at everybody in Yiddish, like, we gotta do something. And it started the uprising of the 20,000, which was like the biggest women's strike. Still?
Yeah.
Have there been
Yeah.
others?
Largest strike of female American workers in history.
So
And,
these,
and it's amazing. Sorry, she had gone on strike a couple of days before with 100 women, and they sent thugs in,
wow.
beat them down. She had broken ribs. She came to the meeting, and she famously later said, you know, and the place was packed, you couldn't breathe. And she said, and the men on stage were droning on
Yeah.
and on,
Samuel
not
Gompers.
saying anything.
Yeah.
And she leapt to her feet. Clara Lemley. God bless her.
I mean, essentially that happened again like 100 years later when they had that panel on abortion and these women got up and it was an all-male panel on abortion in the 70s? 60s?
I forget the exact year you said.
Somewhere around there. And these women got up and they were like, get out of here. There was the red stocking. Yeah.
Well, Silence Equals Death was filmed. I remember. I would go. This was in like 88, 89. I was a student. And I remember those early meetings, thinking how interesting this is.
Yeah.
There's wonderful raw footage on voices of that act up.
Yeah, the ACT UP meetings in the Great Hall because they got too big for the community spaces that they were in.
One more piece on the garments. You know, it's really interesting to speak about present tense and past. So that led to the largest strike. And that was in 1909. And then there was only one factory that held out when the unions got the safety measures, everything put in place. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory.
The infamous Triangle
2 years
Shirtwaist
later,
Factory. Yeah.
1911, burned down and 138 women died, something in that number. And just about a month or two ago, so students of mine, Uri Wegman was a student of mine, that was about 20 years ago. And him and a group designed the memorial for the Triangle Shirtwaist.
Oh, yeah.
They spent like 3 years, whatever, years getting it built. And it opened about a month ago.
Yeah.
And it was incredible. It was beautiful. And the governor spoke. It was a big deal. There was thousands of people showed up in the street.
Again,
for
6
the
degrees to
opening of
Cooper
this.
Union. A Cooper grad
I
made
know.
the memorial.
Isn't
yeah.
that fascinating? Like, you start with Clara, and you get all the way to now.
I need to tell you something about Clara, which you may or may not know, but I love it. So the group of 5th graders that I had mentioned, they went down in the Great Hall and they were doing a Clara Limlick like sort of cosplay. They dressed up and they were, we had like 40 5th graders going, strike, 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 strike. But that's not the funniest part. The funniest part was that the woman who was leading this group, she has been doing like this kind of stuff for a long time, and she knew someone who worked in the nursing home where Clara Limlick spent her final days. And apparently in the nursing home, she organized a movement because the meat wasn't good enough. So she's like in the nursing home like, strike, strike.
I had read to her nursing home.
so
days. She was
good.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's so funny because a couple of years ago, I did a workshop in the Great Hall called Voices, Moments, Movements.
Yeah, I've seen
And
video
we were
from this.
reenacting moments, and my dear friend Homa, who was a classmate with me here, Homa Shajai, she became Clara, and we had like the lights out, and, and all of a sudden, Homa is like, like a seance, right? She just becomes Clara Lemley. It's unbelievable.
And Ukrainian, and we had the Ukrainian American League here for a long time. The Ukrainian Needlecraft Guild was started by the People's Institute, and all this stuff sort of foamed up just 2021 when the war in Ukraine started, and students started coming up to the archive, and they were like, "Do you have anything on Ukraine? Because this neighborhood," and we had all this stuff. So it reverberates still. Yeah.
George Gershwin's biographies speak of hearing the concert this week as well. People's Institute and his friend. So violinist,
Yeah, some really amazing performances.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's such a center for dance too, like in a certain
Yeah.
way. Looking through press clippings of the 50s and 60s.
And sort of ahead of a lot of other things in terms of like inviting different kinds of cultures to perform
Yes.
here.
Yes.
Because this neighborhood was such a mixing pot, it was sort of an idea of like bring your culture to Cooper. But Buck, who teaches dance here, was looking through some of the archives and he was like, this is happening before, you know, modern dance is picking this up as a trend, which is really cool.
So, well, there was the recent WW Norton 100th anniversary of their ties to publishing lectures that were here at the Dean Martin
Yeah.
Institute. And then the National Board of Review mixed in with the
Yeah.
People's Institute. They probably have an anniversary coming.
They probably do. Those are the people that do the film ratings, and now we're really getting in the weeds. But People's Institute they did all the Cooper programming for a long time, which you probably know, and they started the National Board of Review as sort of movie houses kept getting shut down in this neighborhood and all over New York City, and they were like, the people need entertainment. So instead of shutting them down, what if you just had somebody go in and rate them, and then you would know they were fine? Because police were just like, whatever, we're shutting it down because we don't know. So that's how
New York
movie
was
ratings
a real
came about.
center of
Yeah.
filmmaking.
Yeah.
Running along with California
Yeah.
as a competitor.
But that's sort of a continuation of the whole Peter Cooper, P.T. Barnum. Like, the people need entertainment, they need educational, informational stuff available to them. If you shut all the doors, what do you expect people to do?
Yeah, and in the context of the Bowery, you know, which was like a wild, you know,
Yeah.
I picture those early days, like, you know, around the Globe Theater, like Shakespeare's Globe Theater, it was obviously this wildness and
Yeah.
carnivals and bears and everything. And I always think the Bowery was a version, it was our version of that, you know.
Well, the Aztec
Architecturally
Place, right?
speaking, I mean, that's the idea of this placement, was you come in, you know, from the Bowery, you enter, and then you exit and you're like, okay, I've made it. You know, I've got my Cooper degree under my
Gramercy
arm,
Park.
I can go uptown.
Well, Peter Cooper made that
Yeah.
journey, right? He came from the Lower East Side.
Little
and
Dot
then
Street.
Later in his life, he lived in Gramercy Park.
Yeah.
That's where he lived when he was building this, and that was this idea, this kind of funnel from the Bowery up.
He has another great quote, like when he was born, New York City had 20,000 people, stopped at, what was it? Now I'm forgetting the quote, stopped at Chambers or something, and there was no free school, either for day or for night. I'm butchering this quote. But it's just like, so much happened during his life.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Huge. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
This
Yeah.
was great. Thank you, Jackson.
Such a pleasure to share history with you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just so wonderful. It really means a lot. It's so important to society today and to this place and our role in it. I don't think we can do what we do without the archives and the library. I mean, it's structurally part of the entire project. It's the link between the social political project and the educational project.
And we're committed to making it as accessible as possible. We're just continuing to digitize as much as we can, make finding aids for as much as we can, so that we're not siloing anything, but letting it filter in the world as Pete would have wanted.
And capturing
Yeah.
today's history.
Yeah.
it.
Future generations.
Every day is a new day. And
Yep.
There's a lot going on.
Buildings and Grounds knows to bring us posters. They take them down.
We've moved the tree several times
Yeah.
and will again because there have been 3 book programs here.
Yeah. And there's another one Thursday.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Jackson.
That's just great.
Thank you.
Very good.